Hello and welcome to Issues with Issues. This is not a weekly poll. I'm going to be talking a little bit about how some people find it really hard to get into comic books. This is you see it all around nowadays, especially if like the discussion is about manga versus comic books. People talk a lot about this, and the big critique is that it's very hard to get into comics. You don't know which ones to pick up. There's mountains and mountains of lore, and you never it can be very daunting for beginners. And I get that. It's very understandable, especially as a newcomer to comics, because I don't think because nobody tells you how to shop for comics, and it can be very unintuitive to go and see a book with you go and you buy Batman and it's number 58 or whatever, and you feel left out. You feel like you can't start there because comics are a kind of inherently very different medium than what a lot of people are used to, and that is they don't restart, don't end like other media do. You're watching a TV show, you start with season one, and so it makes sense that you want to read a comic book, you want to start with issue one. But these characters have existed for so long, and their stories haven't ended. But that doesn't mean you can't pick up a Batman book nowadays and just read it. You'll hear the term reboot or soft reboot a lot in terms of comics, and there's even a layer beneath that where it's not even there's nothing really continuity happening, but it still creates a very good jumping on point for new people. And I don't think there's a real, other than just jumping on point, I don't think there's a real good term for this. But it's something comics rely on a lot, where they'll finish a big story, and there'll be one or two issues kind of in between where people who weren't reading can kind of pick it up and they can get a couple standalone and they'll be there for the next big story. And this isn't very intuitive to a lot of readers. And so I'm here to tell you, you can just pick up a comic book and read it. It's not hard. In fact, I did it semi recently with the Batgirl series that just launched not just launched over at DC. It's been going on for a little bit. This is issue 18. And this is not a great jumping on point, to be entirely honest with you. I thought it was. I read like the first page, didn't want to go any further inside my local comic book shop because it seemed like a good jumping on point, and I heard a lot of good things about this, and I was very interested in this book, so I just picked it up and started reading it. And even though it's not a very good jumping on point, and it's kind of in the middle, like kind of going into what seems to be Act 3 of a story that I haven't been privy to, I'm not like lost totally. I'm not like, it doesn't feel like jumping into book 3 of Avatar The Last Airbender and you're wondering what's going on, why is anything of this happening. Because comics can be just picked up most of the time. And I will say that I am probably having a better time with this book than a newcomer would have, because I am familiar with the character of Cassandra Cain, and I've read a lot of her previous runs, so I'm not as in the dark as a newcomer would be. But a newcomer probably isn't picking up issue 18 of Batgirl. A newcomer is probably looking at an Amazing Spider-Man, a Batman, maybe a Superman, Wonder Woman, and those, most of the time, you can just pick up an issue 18 of. You could pick up the last issue of Batman, and as long as you understand the gist of Batman, you'll be fine. If you understand he's an orphan, his parents were killed, he turned it into this crusade against crime, he's had Robins, he's rich, he's got all this tech and gadgets and stuff. If you get all that and you're not completely closed off to your uh, to your assumptions being challenged about this character, you'll be fine. Even when they introduce things like, you know, the Joker inside this machine that makes him sane. You they explain it. It's just he's inside a machine that makes him sane. And you know the kind of gist about the Joker. So you can just, okay, so that's where the Joker's at right now. Let's keep going with the story. A vast majority of times something like that happens in a comic book, it'll at least have a, this is what happens after Batman number whatever. And if you really want to, you can go and Google that. But if you don't, it's just what's happening in the story right now. It's just what's happening, and you can kind of leave it at that and keep reading the story for what it is and really enjoy it. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, and they're not comfortable with that because kind of no other media does that. You can't really do that with a TV show or like a movie series or something, or not even like manga, which is like comics' closest kind of sibling in the media world, where there are better jumping on points where it's like after a big arc, kind of like comic books, you'll have like a little bit of a slower period and then you'll get kind of gearing up for the next. But those characters are treated much more like a movie or a TV show character than comics characters are. Comics characters, they've kind of settled into this period, this little not period, but like this this archetype, almost like mythological archetype status, where they have a status quo. That's a word you hear a lot in comics discussion, and it basically, if you don't know, it just means it's like it's what's normal, and particularly if it ever, like, if things go back to that kind of normal state. And because of that, and because of this kind of importance of a status quo in comic books, you can pick stuff up and be mostly familiar, because the characters probably not too long ago were a status quo. They, Batman was exactly what you know about him. All the character changes and even sometimes growth is kind of tossed to the side, and you get that more archetypal Batman character or a Superman character or a Wonder Woman character. And it's good and bad. It does mean these characters, especially the very big popular ones, can be very stagnant over time. You do see this, especially with Batman. Superman has had a couple of changes, like him getting married, having a child, that have made it feel mostly fresh. And I mean, especially modern Superman has had a pretty good run of creative teams behind him. So we get some, it doesn't feel as bad. But then you have like Batman, who, if you didn't know, there was a period of time where he was gearing up to get married. He was going to get married to Catwoman. And that didn't happen. And then we kind of go back, even though it wouldn't be that big of a departure for the status quo and could kind of start a new status quo, that just ends. And we don't get any of that. And he just goes back to the Batman you know him as. And that's bad in that instance. That's bad. It was a bad story. But I'm not going to get into that. But that's why you can just pick up most comic books. Another example I wanted to bring up was the Amazing Spider-Man books right now, where we've been kind of departed from the status quo in a weird way for a little bit, and also like weirdly like a slave to it at the same time, where there are like certain aspects, the like Peter being kind of nerdy and a little bit pathetic and kind of on his own, which is only really an invention in the last like 15 years that became part of his status quo. But that stuck around. A lot of like the characters didn't. Mary Jane has this new status quo with this guy named Paul, which is now being challenged. And then recently Peter was shot up into space, had his own thing going on for a little bit. Now he's back down to Earth, and we'll see what's happening there. But at the end of the day, he's Spider-Man. And if you understand that he can stick to walls and he can swing on webs, it doesn't matter if he goes and has a little thought bubble about him wanting to be with MJ, but she's with Paul. You don't really need to know who Paul is. You can think to yourself, okay, Mary Jane is dating this guy named Paul, and she's at least somewhat committed to him and not Peter. Okay. And then just keep moving on with the story. Because most of it's just going to be normal Spider-Man stuff. He, as a character, hasn't really fundamentally changed. Just kind of his situation has been a little bit different for a little bit. And that's where a lot of comic characters sit right now, where their situation may not be exactly what you expect, but their characterization more or less will be. And so if you understand the basics about that character, you can just pick up the book and go read it. And I think you should. Go to your local comic book shop, find a character that you like. Even if you have a good comic book shop like I have, you can talk to the guy behind the counter, ask if they have any recommendations, tell them, hey, I like this character, this character, this character. What do you recommend? And if it's a good comic book shop, they'll be able to point out a couple of things to you. Especially, this is an especially good time to do this. We're not so far into one of the best jumping on point for comic books ever with the DC Absolute line, but we're far enough in that if you're interested in it, you've got stuff to read. You're not sitting there picking up one single issue and reading it and just kind of mulling it over for a month before the next one comes out. So, go to your local comic book shop, ask for recommendations. If not, peruse the shelves, see if there's anything you like. And here's a point that a lot of people probably kind of instinctually know, but they don't kind of, it never gets brought up in discussion. If you're a little bit afraid to go up and just pick up a single issue of a comic book, it can be kind of daunting. They're not as cheap as they used to be, and they're smaller than people expect sometimes, and you're not sure if you want the kind of commitment of picking it up regularly. There are trade paperbacks. Stuff like this. This is a lot of comic book issues. This one, Green Lantern by Geoff Johns, collects a particular story, and you can just read that story. Like it's, a lot of people call them like graphic novels, but they read like manga or like a book or like you would watch a movie. And so you can do that. If you are just now getting the comic books, you like the MCU, you watched The Batman and you're really interested in it, maybe you've been kind of seeing some TikToks or YouTube videos about comic books and you really want to get into them, but you're a little bit put off by the issue format that comic books release in, scroll through the trade paperback shelves, find a character you like, go to the person on the shelf and go, hey, is this good? Because every character has a bad story. That's just something that happens in a medium that's lasted as long as comic books. But most of the time, if it's made into a trade paperback, it's probably decent. You can pick it up and you can read it and you can have fun. And you can kind of get more used to comic books. And if you're not familiar with, if you're not super familiar with a character, but you're interested in them, you can pick up the trade, learn a little bit more about them. And then maybe after reading Green Lantern by Jeff Johns, you can then go and pick up the Green Lantern Corps, currently publishing. You could pick a couple issues of that up, read that, and then you've got comic books you're reading. You're picking up issues. You're going, you got a day of the week that you go. You're, keeping track of your pull list. It builds. It's a hobby that builds upon itself, and you have to kind of start somewhere. And I think a lot of people are very scared to start because the starting point of comic books isn't as natural as a starting point for a manga or a TV show. So, yeah, that's just, I wanted to make this video real quick to tell you, just go out and pick up comic books. If you're interested in comic books, pick up comic books and read them. That's the way to get started with comic books. There's nothing else. There's nothing stopping you. You're not going to walk into a comic book shop and a wall is going to go up because, we know you aren't a reader. So like we're keeping you away from the good stuff. So you got to read stuff on the normie shelf first. No, you go, you see something you're interested in, you pick it up, you read it. If you like it, you come back in a couple weeks or a month, whatever the schedule is for that book, and you pick up the next one. And if you're a little bit too scared to do that, you go, you walk down the shelf, you wait until you see a trade paperback that you're interested in, you pick that up, and you have more comic to read. You can get more familiar with the medium. It's really that simple. Don't believe people who tell you it's hard to get into comic books. It's just a little unintuitive. Just pick up a comic book and read it. This has been Issues with Issues. If you have any ideas about this topic you want to share, put it down in the comments. I'll be happy to talk with you about it. If not, do all the normal YouTube stuff. And I will see you this Thursday for a new pull list video. Y'all have a great day.